Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to part 3 of the Warbirds Replicas Mosquito build. This episode is all about the nacelles, assembling the nacelles and then attaching them to the wing. And there's quite a bit involved in the assembly of the nacelles, because if you don't get it right, it just isn't going to look right. So anyway, without further ado, I'll explain more by jumping onto the building board and showing you the bits and pieces. To make things easier, I'm only looking at one nacelle at a time, because you get all the parts on the building board, you end up in a right mess. As I said in the first video, it's very important to mark up the parts on the actual physical parts from the written instructions you're given. Having said that, by the time the production kits are out, the full production, they'll probably be better marked up than this one. Anyway, each nacelle comprises 2-ply side rails, undercarriage mount, a former for the front of the nacelle, and then there's a engine mounting plate, a bulkhead firewall, call it what you like here. I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. So when I assembled this dry the first time, I found that it was quite a fiddle to fit this former in. So in the end, I actually cut through there and there, so that slides out. And the reason for that is because the assembly consists of sliding the undercarriage mounting plate in place, like so, and then with that, if that former was still in one piece, you have to slide it right the way down there. Now, as with the fuselage subframe, I do suggest that you sand these to give you a little bit more tolerance, I suppose, because they are very much an interference fit. And that's why I cut that into 2 pieces, because now I can just take this piece and slide it up, having already marked the lines where it go, which are, I should have added, the vertical lines that I've marked on the sides are perpendicular to the bottom, to the base. So I slide the former up over the plate there and against the recess, and even now it's still a bit of a tight fit. And then I would then mount this on top like so. Now, the thing you've got to watch with this, let's pull it all apart again, is that they are handed. Now, if you think about it, the underside of the wing is sloping upwards, which gives its dihedral. And yeah, okay, the full size has got a bit of dihedral as well, but it gives it a bit of dihedral. So if we were just to mount our nacelles off the underside, or hang them off the underside of the wing, then they would be perpendicular to the underside of the wing. So instead of hanging vertical, they would tip up like that and wouldn't look very good. So they've got to hang vertical. So in order to do that, when you put the nacelles together, you've got to have, if you like, a left and a right hand to each nacelle, because they're cut slightly differently. And when they're assembled correctly, let's just see if I can show you this, you will see that one side goes down there. So this will fit on the starboard wing, because the wing is going up like that, and that gives me chance to fit it in place. If you've got it the other way round, then of course, and I'll show you in a moment, I'll get the wing and I'll put this on a wing and show you what would happen. It just won't look right. And that also means you've got to be careful about these formers as well, because they are cut. They may look as though they're identical, but they're not identical. They're cut to suit the left or right hand port or starboard nacelles. With this nacelle dry assembled correctly, if I push that onto the wing like so, you can see that when I hold the wing, there we go, when I hold the wing try and get it level for you there. Level, you can see that that nacelle doesn't stick out there like so. It is hanging vertically off the wing. If I was to incorrectly get the side rails lined up, this is what it would look like. So I'm just going to try and hold that together and put it on the wing. And you should hopefully see, again when I hold the wing level, that this nacelle is now rocking out rather than level, because it's going more or less perpendicular off the underside of the wing. So that's the reason why you need to make sure they're correct. While the nacelles are drying, I've marked up the wing where they're going to go, and this is really to give me a better idea of where the wiring is going to go, because I was contemplating running wiring through the rad fairing on the front of each wing on the leading edge into the fuselage there, but I've decided to keep the power line separate, so the power will go through there, main battery power to the ESC, but I'm going to run all the servos back into the rear of the nacelle here, and then run them back into the fuselage along a line here now. So that I know that the position of the pin bolt to hold the fuselage halves together is 80mm, roughly speaking, from the trailing edge. So that's about there. So if I mark that, so I don't want to come anywhere near there. So thinking about it logically, so I marked where the servo box is going to go. I've already assembled the servo boxes, and I'm just going to mark the actual size of it now. Okay, and I'm going to do the same on the other wing. Okay, so they're marked. What I wanted to do was to determine where the servo boxes are going to go, because the cable obviously from the servo has to come into the nacelles, and then from the nacelles back to a centre position here. So the other thing I've got to look at, as well as where the hole for the joining pin goes through, is where the cable can exit from the underside. So if I just slip the subframe in place, the idea is that the receiver will go here in the bomb bay. So I really want the wires to come up so that I can get to them away from the servo, away from the receiver. So I think if I position the hole about there, right, that gives me a chance to put the receiver there. So the idea is, just to recap, cables which will be the ESC, not the power lines, the signal lines, the ESC, the retracts, the aileron and the flaps will all come in the nacelle area. I'm then going to use an S-bus to PWM converter, which will allow me to plug all those into it and then run one cable only through to the underside here. The same with the other side, which will be then two cables, and I'll join those with a Y lead, because obviously being S-bus, the signal can pass through a single cable. That's fine, and that deals with all my cabling of the wing. And then my tail, elevator and rudder will obviously come through the rear of the wing here. Okay, and the other thing I've got to do is, whilst I'm talking about the hole for the pin that goes through, now that needs to go dead central, obviously, but in the middle there's a glued joint. So if I try to drill through that, it's going to be quite problematic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually cut out a chunk of the wing. I'm going to put balsa, a lump of balsa in there, and glue it in, so that when I drill the hole through, I'm actually drilling through balsa and not through the wing and the foam and the glue. So that's the next job to do. Mark these lines out for this cable runs, cut out the veneer and the foam, and I'll use my soldering iron to cut out the foam. I'm going to actually run some cables in here and then permanently, as it were, glue them in place with no joins in between. So that'll be one cable run from here to here, another cable run from here to here, and no joins in the wing. And for that servo, because what I want to be able to do is to service that if I need to replace that servo at any moment in time, what I need to do is to have the servo cable itself that it comes with in this cutout box here. So there's going to be no joins whatsoever. So I fitted just glued it in place, the balsa block here. See there, and once that's dry, I can trim that to size, and then I'll be able to drill through that. So I'm just going to leave that now, let it dry, and then of course I can cut my other hole through there now for my servo cables. It won't go full depth, and I can cut the line through to the nacelle and to the servo box as well. So like I say, I'm just going to leave that to dry now and come back later. You can see now the glue is dried, so I've just got to cut that balsa block down flush to the wing sheeting. Cutting the holes now for the servo boxes. I've moved them inboard slightly by a whole box width, mainly because I didn't see the point of having them out there. The control horn or the servo arm can come off this side of the servo down to the aileron, which is going to be there, which is absolutely fine. So that's what I'm going to do. Cutting out the pockets for the servo boxes using my soldering iron. Quite a straightforward job. Have to be a little bit careful at the back, because where I've got mine positioned is such that the servo box will nearly touch the top skin veneer. Just a bit of trimming. Right, let's see how that all fits. I've also made a cutout in the servo box for the servo wire that will run through the channel there. Hopefully that should now fit. And of course what you're trying to do is aim for a flush finish on there, which it actually is. So that's great, flush finish. So I'm going to glue both servo boxes in now with the expanding glue. Whilst the glue is drying on the servo boxes, I'm just going to burn out the channel for the servo cable, servo lead to run through. I'm going to go right the way to the centre section. Making sure I don't go too deep, but obviously deep enough to take the balsa strip, which will go in after the cable is in place. So the cable will go in, the strip will go in place like that. So as I said before, this will be a permanent cable from the centre section to the nacelle, and the connection here to the servo as well will be permanent. So any servicing, you can pull the servo out with the connector in there, and obviously the connections will be made in here for my S-bus to PWM converter to run back to the receiver here. In order to fit the nacelles onto the wing, I have to cut a relief hole out, or dip out of the foam for the wheel for the undercarriage. Now in order to do that, I have to assemble the undercarriage. Now what you get in the kit, you get a couple of bent wires there which fit into an aluminium mounting block, and then the wheel will be on a brass tube bush that keeps these two legs in position like so, like that. So that's what you get, and then with those in the alloy block like that, there are grub screws to hold them in place, similarly a grub screw for the main retract. So I've already done the other one. I fitted it to my wheel. I put the brass bush, I reamed out the centre of the wheel to take the brass bush, so that's a firm fit. So I've got a nice brass bearing, if you like, on the wires, and that now is a very rigid construction. And as I said, that will now go onto the retract pin, and it fits on like so. You can see it there with the grub screw there. You'll have to file out a flat on the retract pin. Invariably they're on the wrong side for what we want, so just file one out to suit your grub screw or bolt that holds them in place. It's 3mm that holds them in place. And similarly, you may want to do that on the undercarriage wires. The undercarriage, by the way, the retracts gear is mounted on, not directly onto the ply, it's mounted on two rubber bushes or plates. And the reason for that is to provide some shock absorbance when you land, so that allows a bit of give in the whole of the retract area, so it's not going to bend your retracts, it's not going to rip your plywood out. Just make sure when you put them in that you have got the retract level in there, because obviously you can put one side down harder than the other and it will squish the rubber down, so just make sure that they're level. So with that now in place, I can offer that up to the wing, slide that over the leading edge, put it into position that I've marked, and now I can see that that wheel sits nicely in that recess and it doesn't push the side plates, the ply side plates, off the wing. Now that I'm happy with that, I can glue that in place on the wing. And then what I'm going to do is, I've already cut the channel out for my wiring. Once that's in place, I'm going to feed the wiring through. I could do that beforehand, but I'm going to do it afterwards. I'm going to feed the wiring through. And if I pull that out of the way, I'll be able to get at the wiring quite easily. There. So hopefully you can see, let's turn that around a bit. So there, that's where my wiring is going to come out from my servo for the aileron, my retract wire there, my throttle wire as well, and my servo for the flaps. And then there'll be a push rod or snake that goes down tight against this cheek here, out down here to the horn in the flap here somewhere. Right, so the nacelles are now glued in place, and just to give it some extra strength, I've actually, let's just push that across there. You can see in here I've got some square strips, balsa strips glued in. They're 1/4 by 1/4, not in the kit. And I've also, you can't really see it here, but underneath these undercarriage plates I've put some 1/4 by 1/4 hardwood strip as well, just to give it some extra strength, on the basis that this is where all the loads are going to be taken, obviously landing loads, so I want as much strength there as I can get. Now I've been thinking about the servo placement for the flaps. Originally I was thinking about putting it inside the nacelle, but then I thought, well no, by the time I've got the nacelle outer around it, I won't be able to get at it for servicing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount it in the front here, and if I just turn that over there, I'm going to put a plate in between the front parts of the nacelle to hold the servo, and then the push rod will come back along here through to the control horn, which I'm going to try and get inside the tail of the nacelle housing there. That's the plan anyway. But I've now got the nacelles all fitted. They're glued in, both are glued in place now, absolutely fine, rock solid. So I can now continue with running the wiring through. Remember, permanent wiring here, and then run my balsa strip to infill. Once I've done that, I'll then temporarily put the flaps and ailerons in place, because that will show me where the nacelle plastics are going to go. And I'm doing all that before I fit it to the fuselage, because it's going to be a lot easier to maneuver, I think, the plastic around there. So it's a bit of a peculiar situation where I'm in effect nearly going to finish the nacelles before getting back to finishing the fuselage, but I think that's the best way round. So okay, that completes the third chapter in the build of the Mozzie. Hope you enjoyed it. It was a bit of a nitty-gritty build, didn't seem to be a lot of progress, but there was a lot of time I spent deliberating over what to do when putting the nacelles together, and I hope that came across during the video. Anyway, if you've been watching this and you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you liked what you saw, you know what to do, put a like down below, thumbs up, comments down below as well, and I'll get back to you when I can. So the next in this series is going to be probably fitting the wires for the servos, obviously, and probably the plastic around the nacelles, because as I said during the video, once I get those done, I can then attach the wing to the fuselage and get on with the build, or the rest of the build of the fuselage. Anyway, hopefully see you in the next one, guys. Cheers for now.